Welcome everybody to the Tippy webinar series. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We'll go ahead and get started in about 15 seconds. All right, welcome everyone to the Tippy webinar series. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Ashley Durham, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement at the Tippy College of Business. The Tippy webinar series is an initiative of the Alumni Engagement Department. Our goal is to bring the knowledge of our faculty and staff to you wherever you may be in the world. I'm excited to have Rob Rowenhorst with us today, and he will be teaching us more about the extraordinary power of habits through his presentation, Transformative Habits. Just some information before we get started. We have a lot of content to share with you today, so we will do our best to get to your questions at the end of our presentation. You are always welcome to email Rob with any questions. He will have his contact information up during the Q&A session. As a reminder, all of our virtual presentations are uploaded to the college's YouTube page with closed captions a few days following our live webinar event. Finally, you are encouraged to stay until the end of the webinar so we can gather your thoughts on today's presentation. Your feedback helps make our virtual programs even better, so we appreciate you taking time to answer our survey at the end of the Q&A. Now, I would like to quickly introduce Rob. Rob Rowenhorst is one of the university's highest rated professors based on student evaluations, as well as ratings on ratemyprofessor.com. He's won multiple teaching awards at the department, college, and university levels. He teaches various marketing classes as large as 800 undergraduates, as well as smaller MBA classes of 20. His research interests are in behavior design. He consulted with brands such as Clinique, John Deere, General Motors, Han, Transamerica, and many others. The focus of his talk today is something near and dear to him, which is transformative habits. Thank you for being here today, Rob, and I will let you take it from here.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much, Ashley, for that warm introduction. So I was asked to give a talk, and they said, hey, talk about anything that you want. And I was like, okay, I've got to share what I've been doing the past 5 years in the classrooms related to transformative habits. This has been something that has fundamentally changed my life. It's something that has fundamentally changed how I teach. And I've seen the ripple effects of positive habits throughout my family and throughout all of my students. And so years ago, I got my PhD here at the University of Iowa. It was 2009. And for almost all of this time, I've been asking students the first day of class, why are we here? And so I'm super curious about why you're all joining this webinar. And so at any point throughout this entire presentation, if you've got questions, if you've got comments, please type them into the chat. I am the worst multitasker. I cannot multitask worth anything. I will slow down like a computer from the 90s. So I'm going to ignore it, but I've asked Ashley to monitor the chat. If there are pertinent questions, interrupt me, do whatever. And so we'll definitely have the Q&A at the end. So I asked my undergraduates, well, why are we here? And especially when it's a class of like 600 like this one, the undergrads, they'll say, oh, because it's required, or because it's part of my major, or because I need it for a job, or I need it for this, that, or the other thing. But eventually, hopefully, fingers crossed, somebody says that they are actually here to think better. And there we go. And so, the real reason that you're in college is to hopefully improve your mind, improve the ideas that you have. And that's not enough, because if you're improving your mind and you're thinking better, you need to be able to communicate. We are definitely the writing university. We are known for oral presentations. We're known for writing. You got to be able to communicate these better ideas. And so I thought that was enough. Right. And that's what I for many years, I was focusing in on, the brain on one side. And I thought that's enough. And then about 8 years ago, I had a transformative event. And that event changed my life, and it completely changed how I teach. And that event was the birth of my fourth child. And so this is literally the day of. And as you can see from this picture, I have mixed emotions about this picture. On the one hand, very happy. On the other hand, you can see I held on to my hair for way too long, at least 18 months, if not 2 years, if my wife is being honest with me. I held on to that sucker. Now, I needed to try, Rogaine and Propecia and all this kind of stuff, but I held on to that hair way too long. The other thing that you can see in this picture, I'm rocking the dad bod. I'm about 50 pounds over my ideal body weight. It's not a good look. I was just gaining weight. I was an insomniac. I had a lot of problems going on. Not a happy time in my life. So I decided, hey, between the weight and the hair, there's one of these I can instantly change. So I shaved my head, and then I'm sitting there, and this was a really weird question, and I have mixed emotions sharing it, but I do. I'm sitting there, and I'm like, who are like bald role models? And I'm like, hey, what about Jason Statham? That guy looks pretty good. So I do some research on Jason Statham, and I know miscellaneous facts like Jason Statham's biceps are between 16 and 18 inches. And he didn't make the Olympics, but he was a diver. All right. He participated in the Olympic trials in 1988 and 1992. He didn't make the cut for the Olympics for the British team, but I was like, oh my gosh, as a kid, I liked swimming. And so I was like, I'll go swim. And so at first, I'd do the breaststroke, and I'd get to the end of the lane, and I'd take a breath. I'd take a rest, and then I'd go back, and I'd take a rest. I'd go back and take a rest, and etc. And I'm building small, and I'm doing this daily. And then I would, my reward for exercising and swimming is I'd have this massive pot of pasta. That was just my meal. And so I had to go swimming. Then I'd reward myself, massive pot of rotini with melted butter and Parmesan. And then I kept going swimming. And eventually I stopped taking rests. And then eventually I started doing, crawl and then breaststroke. And then I started doing crawl all the time. And then I started, getting faster. And then I started doing flip turns. And then I start, swimming a mile in under 30 minutes. And then I start to say, hey, why am I eating pasta? Yeah, I'm losing weight due to the swimming, but maybe I ought to, work on my diet. And so then I'm like, okay, well, I guess I don't need all these carbs and pasta. And I started tracking my calories for a few days. And if you're trying to lose weight, it's a eye-opening experience tracking your calories just for a few days to see what you're actually consuming. And so I start, eating right and doing stuff. And then I'm like, I'm an insomniac. How do I improve my sleep? Well, maybe going to bed at the same time, waking up with light, making the room dark, making it colder with air conditioning, making it colder in terms of a bed with a chili pad mattress thing. We can get into that if you're interested. Just all kinds of hacks and habits related to sleep and exercise and food and all of this. And this is, over the course of years, this is not overnight. And so I'm proud to say my resting heartbeat is like an Olympic athlete. It's down in the 30s at night. It's in the 40s, if I'm just laying down reading a book during the day. And so it completely changed my life. And it's had ripple effects in terms of my wife. She starts seeing me do this, and then she starts swinging. And now she's even a more avid swimmer than me. My kids are swimmers. I didn't push them. I told them do whatever you want. And now they're swimmers. And so I came through this all organically. And then I started reading about habits. And the best popular press book, I recommend it to everybody. I give dozens of copies of this away every semester to students. I have a money back guarantee saying if you buy this book and you don't like it, I will buy it back from you. That applies to everybody on this webinar of James Clear's Atomic Habits. This is a wonderful book. It goes through so many different things. We'll touch upon some of them in this webinar, but it's the best damn book out there as far as habits go. On Amazon, like it says on the book jacket, it sold 10 million copies on Amazon. It's been on the top 10 most read list for 4 years running. Just last week when I made this deck, it's number 3 this week. I mean, it's an incredible, incredible book. So I highly recommend it. So anyhow, that's going on in my personal life. And then in my professional life, I was teaching an entrepreneurship class, and the students had to make book presentations related to business. Somebody asked me, "Hey, can I talk about and read this book called Atomic Habits?" And I'm like, It's not really related to business, but this is entrepreneurship. We're all about being better. Yeah, okay, I love that book. Go ahead. So it makes this presentation in class. And then at the end of the presentation, I'm given a quiz unrelated to the book or anything, this quiz. And so at the end of the quiz, I say, hey, everybody, based on today's presentation, write down a habit you want to do. So the students write things like, I want to consume more water. I want to sleep better. I want to learn to play the guitar, and a whole bunch of stuff. Okay. It was a class of about 30, I believe. And then a week goes by and I'd give a weekly quiz. And so I gave the quiz. And then again, I asked, okay, everybody, how many of you accomplish your habit? Just write it down, yes or no. And what's a habit that you want to accomplish this week? And by Jove, about 2/3 of students accomplished that habit. And I connected with that class on a completely different level than I had any other. And so from there was born the simplest assignment. And the assignment, and it's gone through iterations. So I'll show you the first question from years ago, but it is, what habit do you want to achieve for the next week? Was the most basic question. And over the years and thousands of students, I can tell you about on a weekly basis, and there are variations, and I'll get into the variations later, about 2/3 of people accomplish this habit. So literally, I have people over the course of a semester, they quit smoking, or they lose like 20 pounds over the course of 16 weeks, or they learn a new language, or they start sleeping better, or they start putting their phone away and not being on their phone as much, and their screen time drops. And it's all this simple, dopey prompt of weekly, they have to tell me these things. And they get the points whether they do it or not. They say, I didn't do it, and full points. And I've done it with points, I've done it without points. Points don't seem to matter. It's just the prompt of what's a habit that you want to accomplish daily for the next week. All right. And so I thought at first when I was doing this, I was kind of worried. I was like, my mentor was this crotchety old guy named Dave Collins. And I knew Dave would give me grief if I ever told him about the habit assignment. He's like, you got to be teaching marketing. These people are paying for marketing. What are you doing with this habit stuff? But I love this quote by Seth Godin, who's a business consultant, podcaster, author, all kinds of stuff. I think he's written 40 books at this point, and some amazing number. But anyhow, he says that marketing is a generous act of helping others become who they seek to become. And I think he's absolutely right. And I thought, again, this developed with the undergrads. I thought the MBAs are going to just roast me. They'll just say, this is too warm and fuzzy, Rob. What are you doing with this habit stuff? But if anything, I think the MBAs even enjoy it more. And the MBAs write stuff about, I'm going to spend quality time with my kids. I'm going to read to my kids at night. This was touching, and it kind of almost brings a tear to my eye. But this one student wrote one time, when I get home from work, I'm going to listen to the radio in the car for 2 minutes and decompress so I don't go yell at my kids. And it's just this simple prompt that is having ripple effects in people's lives. And the MBAs, again, many work, obviously, almost all of them work. And so many of them implement this kind of, they talk to me about implementing this stuff in the teams that they lead, and just talking to people about habits and how do you improve yourself on a daily basis. And so my mission initially, it's all about helping people think better, communicate more, etc. But with time, my mission has become more all encompassing. And so as I tell students, my mission is to help students become better versions of themselves. And behavior design, which I'm really interested in, it's not about losing 10 pounds and putting the phone down. Just like college is not about learning some topics in classes. The behavior design and college is about becoming the type of person you want to be. It's about creating the kind of family and team and community and world in which we want to live. And so it's much bigger than just focusing in on, somebody's brain and mostly to one side. And so I ask questions. I tend to ask a lot of questions to students, and this is webinar, so we can't have too much, two-way. But I am fascinated by this, and so I asked this during the first week of class. I say to students, and we're going to have a poll. So Ashley, if you could start the poll, I'm not entirely sure how that's going to. Oh, perfect. Here we go. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, everybody, to what extent are you living at your highest potential? Right. And so 10 is the highest, 1 is the lowest. And so I'd appreciate knowing what people think in terms of living to their highest potential. All right, Ashley, is there a way to, I don't know, because I can't see if people have voted, or can you display how? All right, perfect. So it looks like mean is about 6-ish. All right, so we've got about people at about 6, maybe 7, depends, but definitely 6 or 7. All right, so perfect. All right, and that's what I've seen over the years. Invariably, especially at the MBA. Honestly, the MBAs are a little bit lower. And so I guess in terms of the target market of this webinar, very similar probably to the MBAs, dead on in terms of most people putting in at about a 6. All right, so then the second question I have for all of you, and Ashley, you can display this. To what extent are you leveraging work to reach your highest potential? And if you're still a student, then, just fill in, think about college or whatever. But I think most people in this webinar are working. So to what extent are you leveraging work to reach your highest potential?
All right, we give it 5 more seconds. Then we're going to close the poll. 3,
All right.
2, 1.
Perfect. And this one is tough to, maybe it might be a 6, might be a 5. It's kind of very similar. This is intriguing. In the usually how this plays out is work is a little less. Now, again, I'm not running the numbers and I'm just kind of ballparking it. So maybe if we ran the numbers, it would be a little less. I don't know. But anyhow, the fact that people are, the biggest thing is people aren't living to their highest potential. Very few people, there are very few 10s. All right. Now, thankfully, very few 1s, but there's a huge range in the middle. And so when I'm thinking about, especially in terms of the large lectures that I teach, I'm exposed to more and more undergrads. So in terms of the undergraduates that I'm exposed to, this is for undergraduates in college, across the nation. This isn't just the University of Iowa. So across the nation, students in college, 44% experiencing depression and anxiety. 10% throughout their 4, 5, however many years they're in college, 10% have suicidal ideation. And this just floored me in the sense of, we're content experts, hopefully you're professors, and we focus in on, our specific niche. I'm going to teach you chemistry. I'm going to teach you biology. I'm going to teach you human physiology, German, whatever, but we're not going to focus in on the big picture stuff. We're not going to focus in on, what it takes to be a better human. And we just assume you're going to learn that. And so this fundamentally had a major impact on my teaching. Now, again, 95, 98% of the time, I'm talking about marketing, but there's still this minority part where I'm talking about the big picture stuff. And so at the end of the day, we're all trying to create order from chaos. The world is very chaotic. And so at its most fundamental level, when you were a baby, we had the desire, we needed to eat, we needed to sleep, we needed to stay warm and dry, and we wanted to be touched or loved. That's it. That's really it as a baby. And that's kind of difficult, and it's weird. It's weird learning. It's reinforcement, and it's confusing. And one of my favorite games to play, but when I think about it, it's a horrific game, is peekaboo. Like peekaboo with a baby. I love this. This is one of my favorite pictures of my 16-year-old. Obviously not 16 at the time, but we're playing peekaboo. And so he was my firstborn, and we're playing peekaboo, and he gets all excited. Now, if you play peekaboo, right, you cover up your face, and it's like, oh my gosh, dad or mom has phased out of existence. They are no longer there. And the first time you like bring your face back, you see just this look of worry and horror in your baby. And they're like, oh my, and then, as a parent, you're like, happy and everything. And you got to think as a baby, you're freaked out. And why is dad all excited? He just phased in and out of existence. What's this all about? With enough repeated pairings of dad or mom being happy, then you're like, oh, this is an okay game. I'm going to be super excited for peekaboo. But that's the most basic thing as a baby. But life gets way more complex. As you age, your options multiply. And as those options multiply, this becomes a real complexity management issue. And so, for instance, lunch. Some of you probably, or many of you probably are eating right now. Kudos for multitasking. And what were the options that you probably thought of? I'm guessing most people think of like two, right? It's your standard. I usually have a bagel, and maybe I did leftovers from yesterday, or maybe there's a restaurant down the street, or there's two or three things that you might consider. But if you think about how many options do you really have available? It's millions. You could have said, I'm going to skip this webinar. I'm going to fly to Paris. I'm going to have a Michelin star experience for lunch. It's going to be great. And so life really becomes this complexity management issue. And again, you get to a certain stage in your life. My undergraduates may not have experienced this, but certainly most of the people in this webinar and MBAs have experienced this of, you have serious health problems. Either you have serious health problems or somebody that a family member has serious health problems. And so how are you preparing for that? Right. And so people, I'm not a clinical psychologist, but if you talk to them, most the people that are depressed, it's just the world is too complex for whatever reason. Right. And so how are you preparing for the heartache ahead? Because you will experience it. And so you got to think about, are you the Netherlands or are you New Orleans? Right. So the Netherlands, they're basically, their country should be underwater, but it's not. And they build really good dikes. All right. So they're good at a lot of things. And so when they construct these dikes, they think about it. Their Army Corps of Engineers thinks and says, what's the worst storm that's going to occur in 10,000 years? That's their kind of thinking. Versus New Orleans, who the Army Corps of Engineers thought, what's the worst storm that's going to occur in 100 years? And we'll build to that. And so if you figure, well, the average person lives about 80, there's a pretty good chance there's going to be a storm and New Orleans is going to be swamped. And so, habits, my argument is that habits not only lead you hopefully to a good life, but they're preparing you for those bad days ahead when it's going to get complex and it's going to get tough, but you already know the answers to the questions. You're already in these habit loops. You're doing great things, and it just keeps repeating. And so I respect him as he's a very interesting individual. I don't know if you've ever been exposed to this guy, but he's a retired Navy SEAL, Jocko Willink, and he wrote a book called Discipline Equals Freedom. And he makes the argument that habits don't restrict freedom, they create it, and that, people that don't have good habits are the ones with the least amount of freedom. So if you don't have good financial habits, you just spend your money willy-nilly, you're struggling for your next dollar. If you don't have good health habits, you're always going to be short on energy. And if you don't have good learning habits, you're always behind the curve. And so it's never too late to make that choice and to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to focus in on. And just say, in the case of Jocko, he wakes up every morning at 4:30 and works out. And he doesn't, for many of us, it's like, oh, I'm going to work out today. Well, what time? Well, whenever I can fit it in. And maybe you'll do it. But oftentimes, if you don't have the discipline, maybe you won't, and you start making excuses. And so my argument is you are a lagging measure of your habits. And so habits are just, it's a settled tendency or usual manner of behavior. And so for me, get up, take care of things, take care of the dogs, go on a dog walk, then breakfast, get my youngest off to grade school, then work out, shower, journal, meditate. I just go in these habit loops, all right, and stacks of habits. And so in terms of your lagging measure of your habits, your net worth is a lagging measure of your financial habits. Your weight is a lagging measure of your eating habits. Your knowledge is a lagging measure of your learning habits. The clutter in your office or at home is a lagging measure of your cleaning habits. You get what you repeat. And so habits are not trivial. They are the bedrock of somebody's identity. And so in various studies, they used to, hopefully many of you might remember pagers, Now it's all apps on smartphones, but what they'll do is they'll ping people just randomly throughout the day if you're part of these experiments, and they'll say, hey, are you engaged in a habit, something that you routinely do, or are you engaged in something that is new to you for the day? And invariably, it comes up about 44%, at least in the studies, is habit. So about half of your life, it's just habits. And so these are not trivial in terms of you get nervous and you bite your nails. These are the habits in terms of how are you studying, how are you sleeping, how are you doing all kinds of stuff. And so when you design your day, I've stolen this screenshot from a vlogger, Casey Neistat. So he shows dominoes in 24 hours. And this is how we're all equal. We're all different in that, we have different intellectual capacities, we have different looks, we have different genetics, all kinds of stuff, but we all have 24 hours out of the day. And so it's about how do you maximize, how do you spend time on the right things? And so I encourage students, and I question this, and this is during the first week of class in all of my classes, and we'll do it here in the webinar. I ask students very simple question, and that is, what habits lead to a better life? And so this will be the one time that I monitor the chat, because otherwise I can't multitask with anything. I'm going to ask you all, what are the habits that lead to a better life? Type them in, and I'll give you an example. I think sleep is super important. Okay, it's like there are various studies based on genetics, et cetera. Between 6 and 8 hours out of the day, you got to do stuff. So for most people, for all of you, what is the most important? So I'm seeing exercise, gratitude, whole foods, water, nutrition, hydration, sleep, human connection, kids, meditation, food, exercise, sleep, prayer, getting sunshine, faith, family, laughing, sleep, exercise, relationships, community, therapy, fishing, I like fishing, prayer, creative outlets, to-do lists, real connection, sleep, dogs, self-care, finding joy, generous acts, perfect. All right, now I'm gonna stop. You can keep going in the chat, but I'm gonna keep going in the PowerPoint. Now, in years of doing this, in all the classes, it comes down to a pretty similar list. There's some variation, but the list looks like this. And again, these are not in any particular order, but you've got exercise, you've got food, water, we can include with that, sleep, relationships, you've got passion or work, learning, hobbies, and spirituality, whether that's religious or meditation, something like that. And that's about it. That's about it. And so, in terms of leading a good life, it's about how are you spending time on some very basic things. And when it happens, well, it happens with all students, but sometimes students will say, I don't have enough time. Sorry, Rob, don't have enough time. I say, show me, let me see your screen time. I have yet to meet anybody who will show me their phone. I've had one person. I had one student one time who said, well, I'll show you, but it's for work purposes. This is why I'm spending all this time. And okay, maybe. But you really have to focus in on what big picture, what are the things that you want to be spending your time on. And so I think that this list or similar, you could tweak it. I'm sure fishing, well, that's a hobby, but you can tweak it to your own individual differences and what's most important to you. And so in terms of forming good habits, I have mad respect for this guy. This is Dave Brailsford, is the guy in the window of the car. Okay, so Dave Brailsford was a professional cyclist, didn't make it as a professional cyclist, but he was so intrigued with it. He used to be a bad student, but then he was so intrigued with professional cycling that he kind of got involved and became a sports psychologist. And then he gets hired on by the British racing team. All right. Now, the British racing team, before David came, was so bad. Equipment manufacturers and apparel manufacturers did not want to be associated with the British racing team. They were so bad, they didn't want them using their bikes because they didn't want people to see the losers riding their bikes. So Brailsford comes in, and within 5 years of taking over, the British cycling team wins 60% of the gold medals in the 2008 Olympics. In 2012 in London, they do even better. They set 9 Olympic records and 7 world records. And it's all due to what David Brailsford calls the aggregation of marginal gains. And the aggregation of marginal gains is, yes, as a cyclist, you focus in on nutrition, you focus in on, getting a lighter bike. This is what everybody does. This is table stakes. Brailsford takes it a step further of constantly asking, how can we improve? What are the habits? What are the things that we can tweak to get better? And so, for instance, they hired a surgeon to come in and teach everyone how to wash their hands. Again, what does this have to do with cycling? Well, nothing, but in terms of life, if you wash your hands better, you're going to get sick less. And so they'd also test, by individual, what's the best pillow for you? What's the best mattress for you? Doesn't necessarily deal with directly cycling, but obviously getting good sleep is important. They would, for storing their bikes, you don't see it in this photo since the bikes are on top of a car, but for where they store them like vans, they painted the inside of the van white such that they could just spot little specks of dust and make it clean. And so it's just these little tiny things that you do on a daily basis that will add up to great big gains. And in terms of creating great habits, it comes down to there's a whole bunch, and depending on which book, research article, etc., you have many different things. But in terms of commonality, I'm going to simplify it and basically come down to three things that I want to emphasize. One, it's got to be specific. Two, it's got to be easy. And three, it's got to be rewarding. So specific. This is how the habit assignment started. Great intentions, but the first formulation of it was flawed in asking people, I want to sleep better. Well, that's a great aspiration. I want to reduce screen time. I want to be more productive. Great. Okay. But those aren't behaviors that are going to lead to outcomes. Okay. Outcomes are more measurable, like I'm getting 8 hours of sleep, or, I'm a straight A student. Again, great. Outcomes and aspirations important, but what you really need to focus in on is be specific. It's a behavior that you can do right now, yes or no. Yes or no, you can turn off your phone. Yes or no, you can eat a carrot or potato chips. Yes or no, you can open a book and read 5 pages. And so in terms of behavior design, being very specific when it comes to habits. And so the habit assignment has morphed into asking people not only their aspirations, outcomes, and behaviors, but on a weekly basis is focusing in on, I will some behavior. So it's a yes, no. It's not kind of a kludgy thing like, sleep better. Sleep's important, but how do you measure sleeping better? Can't really measure that. But you can measure, did I, read a book right before going to bed for 30 minutes to kind of just calm me down? Yes or no? All right. So I will some behavior at some certain time, again, be more and more specific, in a certain location. Okay. Now, the other thing, you can stack multiple habits together. So I brush my teeth at night and then I floss. All right. So you just say, after brushing, I will floss. All right. And so creating great habit stacks is another massive, great way to create habits that you stick with. Now, all right, so you're making things specific. Second thing, making things easy. So Kurt Lewin was a German-American psychologist in the 1930s, and he said basically behavior is a function of a person in their environment, and so your environment shapes your success. And so no one can consistently stick to positive habits if you have a negative environment. If you're trying to lose weight and you just have junk food options in your house, you will not lose weight. I had to get rid of ranch wheat thins, the best snack of all time, in my opinion. All right. And so occasionally my wife buys them when they're on sale, and I'm just bitter about it because I don't have the willpower to say no. And so your environment shapes and controls your success. And so oftentimes 79% of people, this is just people in general, 79% check their phone within 15 minutes of waking up. Ashton Kutcher, the actor, I love one quote that I've heard attributed to him, which is, email is other people's to-do list for you. And so if your first instinct, and this is most people, is to check their email, your day is already hijacked by other people. And so if you want to create good habits, focusing in on yourself first thing out of the morning, do what's important to you. And it's like that list of 8 things. Be sure you're focusing in on you. And so as marketers, as individuals, we control our environment. We have a large say in the environment. Same thing with marketers, right? For better or worse, McDonald's saying, would you like fries with that? Very successful. McDonald's saying, if you remember this, would you like to supersize that? Again, very successful until that Supersize Me movie came out, and it was like, oh, maybe supersizing is not the way to go. And so McDonald's kind of did it themselves. But one way to influence behavior is you reduce that friction, right? And so marketers are great at this in terms of controlling the environment. Netflix, you don't even need to say next episode, it just auto plays. And so think about how you're going to make this easy for yourself. So there are studies in terms of how far away you are from the gym. All right. And so you can be successful in designing your environment. So key takeaway, go to a gym that's close. If you belong to a gym that's like over 5 miles, on average, people go about once a month. If you go to a gym that's under 4 miles or 3.7, then you go like 5 times a month. Okay. And so you got to figure out, okay, what's holding you back, right? It might be the environment. And so if it's some other issue, say sometimes people are like, I don't have the time. Well, can you make it shorter, right? I don't have the time to exercise. Do you have 10 minutes? Okay, well, if you do, then figure out that 10-minute exercise. If you don't, if you're like, I'm tired, I'm tired, I'm too tired to work out. Well, then the problem isn't time, it's physical effort. And so then you try and figure out, okay, can you do yoga? Can you do stretching? Can you do something else? And so we control our environment. So viewers with a psychology background may recognize this as Skinner's box. So Skinner's box, he was really interested in operant conditioning of stimulus response reward. So you've got a little button, you hit that button, you get a food pellet, and you get this reward. Well, social media, computer manufacturers have hijacked attention, right? When you get a little ping on your phone, a notification of text message or somebody's favorited, thumbed up, whatever, some social media, you're like, oh man, a little bubble, I gotta check that out. Again, hijacking your time. And so cut the distractions, cut the notifications, control your environment, make it easy to have positive habits. All right. So specific, easy. Third thing, make it rewarding. You got to figure, and what's rewarding for one individual is different for others. you know so, when I first started again swimming, I needed I needed that big pot of pasta. If you needed to eat a cookie, if you need to eat something bad to start a good habit, go for it. But with time it will probably change. And so I think many of us, you might runner's high or an exercise high, you just feel good. This is why many gyms have mirrors, because then you pose and you feel good about yourself. But that's not, you don't even need to do that. Maybe it's just giving yourself a high five in the mirror or feeling positive thoughts. Yes, I did it. Yes, I journaled. Oh, I feel so much better. I meditated or I prayed or did all kinds of stuff. And so, a simple smile or saying some quiet affirmation in your head might be enough. It doesn't need to be some overt thing. But if it is an overt thing, make sure that it's paired together. Okay, so people might say, oh, well, I'm going to exercise and then I get to watch Netflix later tonight. Well, 8 hours, the brain doesn't pair those two together. And so the reward has to take place right after the behavior to create this behavior loop. All right. And so make it specific, make it easy, make it rewarding. And then some stuff, and I haven't published this, but I'm coming out. Try and figure out your identity. Try and figure out, finish the sentence, I'm the kind of person who, all right. And I promise this is the last picture of Jason Statham. You try to figure out your identity. And it doesn't need to be, oh, I want to be like Jason Statham, although that applied for many years and maybe still does for me. But it's, I want to be an athlete. I'm a lifelong learner. Get to know the lingo within the sport that you want to do. Get to figure out who are the experts, follow their podcasts, watch their movies, read their books, do this sort of thing such that it becomes part of your identity. Because if it's part of your identity, you're more likely to stick with it. And so there's a huge difference between saying, I'm trying to quit versus I'm a non-smoker. And so if this thing is part of your identity, you are way more likely to stick with it. And so try and figure out that identity. And then the final thing I like ending on quotes. And so Confucius once said, all people are the same. only their habits differ. And so it's about trying to figure out, okay, what are the habits that are really, really important to you? Leveraging those habits. You make it specific, you make it easy, you make it rewarding, and then constantly iterating. I love the whole notion of the aggregation of marginal gains, constantly questioning the little stuff you do. Even if it's just some, bicep rep, how long are you elongating your arm? How slowly are you bringing it up? How far are you bringing it up? How slowly do you let it go? And just testing it. Everybody's different. And so there's no one right answer. Heavy weight, low weight, time of day effects. There's all kinds of research, all kinds of stuff, but figure out what's right for you. And so we're all the same, but only our habits differ. Recommended reading. I love reading and consuming stuff. And so in terms of popular press books, again, number one recommendation, Atomic Habits. I think that's the bar none best book when it comes to habits. Money back guarantee to everybody watching this webinar. If you buy it, don't like it, I'll buy it off you so I can give it to students. Second book, Good Habits, Bad Habits by Wendy Wood. She's a prolific researcher. So if you're really interested in some of the science behind habits, I would read that one. Another good one is BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits. And so those are some kind of takeaways and books. Otherwise, we'll definitely open it up to questions. Ashley, I don't know well, I guess I'm so used to Zoom where people ask them themselves, but I guess Ashley, you've been monitoring the chat, and so just let me know if there are questions. Also, in terms of questions, this is my contact information. I know we got about 18 minutes or whatever, but if you don't want to ask a question, or you don't have time, or you're watching this on YouTube and you want to get in touch with me, that's my email and that's my LinkedIn.
Well, I'm having some.
Ashley, I can barely hear him. Turn up my volume.
All right,
Okay.
can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Great. I'm having some visual issues, but that's okay. We're still going to get to this Q&A. So in the chat, I thought there's some really interesting conversations going back and forth that maybe you'd like to speak to. They're talking
Sure.
about the fear of being perfect stops them from even trying because they're already worrying about failure. And so how does perfectionism play into not wanting to start a habit because you're already envisioning that you're going to fail? So here, perfectionism makes me want to never start for fear of failing. And I need to remind myself that 10 minutes is better than doing nothing.
Oh,
And
totally.
then you set off a firestorm in the chat. So I would love to hear you kind of speak to that.
Yeah. This reminds me of framing effects. So there was another mentor of mine, was a guy named old guy named Irwin Levin, and Irwin fired. He's most known for cooking up ground beef in the bottom. It no longer even exists, the building he did it in. But anyhow, he cooks up this ground beef on campus, and then he serves it to people, and he calls it either 80% lean or 20, or excuse me, 80% lean or 20% fat. Same thing, but just the label you stick on it means that people associate it with better or worse things. And so if it's 80% lean, people are more likely to pay more money for it. They want it more. They think it tastes better, but it's the same stuff. So how we label things is really, really important. So some of the things in terms of goals are how close are you to your goal or how far away. And so if you're always focusing in on, I'm trying to run a marathon and I've only done 2 feet. Well, that sucks. I've got so much further to go. But it's more about framing it as, how were you yesterday? Don't worry about other people. Other people are meaningless. It's, how were you yesterday? If you're better today than yesterday, you do that 10 minutes, you do that 5 minutes, you do one push-up. I almost did a push-up, but we won't do that. Anyhow, it's just about that marginal improvement, and those gains with time are what really matter. And so I mean, it's very easy to say, I don't want to do it because I'm imperfect. Um, everybody's imperfect, right? I was embarrassed to go swimming. I didn't really know how to swim. I taught myself through a whole bunch of YouTube videos. Speedo International has some really great YouTube videos. Anyhow, yeah, it's just about encouraging that mindset of, I want to be a learner. I want to get better. I want to, and just starting small, starting tiny. You don't have to do a mile. You don't have to do 30 minutes. You don't have to quit overnight. It's just be better than yesterday.
I think we're going to build off of that a little bit. So there's some conversation about this in the chat. And then, you and I were talking about this yesterday. So is starting with big habits, like life altering habits or small habits, better or more effective for change?
Yeah. All right. So there's tons of individual differences. So I'm just going to speak to what works for most. Clearly, in terms of the research, what most works for most is start small and ratchet up. All right. And so if you're like, if you're like me, and this is why this is very personal, and I hope you don't mind me telling personal stories. I'm not bragging in the least. I'm just telling you my journey of I'm an insomniac, I'm overweight, I'm out of shape, and I'm going bald. I've got a lot of negative. Um, but it's just taking it one step at a time and doing one minor thing and realizing hopefully you've got a long time horizon. And so starting with those really small habits and building off of that and those aggregation of marginal gains, that is way more successful and people stick with it longer if they start small and grow versus people that are like, I'm going to change overnight. I'm going to, if I'm not working out, I'm going to work out 2 hours and I'm going to read for multiple hours and I'm going to be good for my kids and I'm going to throw everything out of my house that's junk food and change to healthy food. And the big changes might last a day or two, but you burn yourself out so fast. And so you need that familiarity with things and your current habit stack. Yeah, but again, you can tweak things. You can push yourself. But yeah, you don't want to go too far because then again your fear of everything is new and you're just scared. You're the little baby. This is a whole new brave world. I'm shutting down. I'm going back to my old stuff as opposed to just that tiny little tweak of I'm gonna fill in the blank with whatever habit you're gonna do. So not universal, but the recommendation for almost everybody: start small.
So we've got a couple of questions about this. Any tips for a good way to track your habit stacking progress? And then part B of that question was, how do you manage stacking multiple habits without becoming overwhelmed?
Okay, in terms of habit progress, it varies again, individual differences, but there are many good habit tracking apps out there. The best, my personal advice and what I do personally is just journaling and just kind of reflecting on the week or on the day and saying what is working and what is not. And I found that to be the most helpful. And so and this has evolved with time. My prompts when it comes to journaling, I have two journals, one for my kids, which I've maintained for 14 years of just funny things they say. And then the other journal in terms of my own habits and being positive has three prompts. And there are many different habit or journals out there. But in terms of the prompts, it's what's one thing, what's the most major thing that I want to accomplish today? What's something that I'm grateful for? And what is something that I'm willing to forgive myself or let go of? And so with those kinds of prompts, it's just good to reflect on where you're at, what's working, what's not. Um, and I track things. I used to be way more into tracking, but now I'm pushing more on this whole identity thing and kind of focusing in on. There's a really great author and speaker, Simon Sinek, and his latest work is on the infinite game. And so, are you playing an infinite game? And I don't think we have time to get too much into this, but are you thinking long term is basically the crux of it. And if you're thinking long term, it's okay to fail. It's okay to try new things. It's okay to experiment, and you don't have to get it all right. And again, when it comes to habits, there's so many individual differences that what worked for your friend may not work for you and vice versa. And so I track things through writing, but again, there's tons of apps. You can on the app store of whatever phone manufacturer, you can find all kinds of habit tracking apps, and those have been successful for various students too. And
So
then what
just,
was the second part of the question? I forget,
oh,
Ashley.
sorry. The other part of the question was, I think you've sort of managed it, but how do you manage stacking multiple habits without becoming overwhelmed?
Yeah, I mean, it's just how much time and the importance do you put to it? Um, when I was really grinding at my greatest level in terms of the habits, the vast majority of my day was just one massive habit stack. Then I got dogs, and dogs are terrible for productivity. But then it was just different habits. I got to take them out now every couple hours. They got to go to the bathroom, but it gets me out into nature. And so that has been wonderful. And just that they love you and you come home and it's like, oh my gosh, best thing in the world. So yeah, there's no one right answer when it comes to uh, you don't want to be overwhelmed, but you just what's the right fit and what can you fit in your day? What feels right to you? You'll know.
I just want to remind people to keep putting those questions in the Q&A. I do see some questions coming in through the chat, and I'm trying to pull them out as I see them, but if you could pop those questions into the Q&A, that would help me continue to organize and get to all of your questions. A good one did come in from Claire. I love the idea of trying habits to identify, i.e., I'm going to quit smoking versus I'm a non-smoker. The challenge I have with that is that when I don't follow through on that habit, my inner critic uses that against me by asserting my identity is in the reverse, i.e., I am a smoker. How do you manage the identity piece when you're in the early stages of habit formation?
That's a really good question. I mean, for me, it's just repetition, which I don't know if that's because I can see how that would be depressing, but it's just again, is this the big thing with habits is this important enough to you that you're going to see it through, and you might get you. There's a really interesting book by Seth Godin called The Dip of when it's okay to let go, because you do reach that stage of there's some pushback here. Is it worth seeing it through, or should I quit? And that's a difficult thing. And so that book kind of works through some questions and to ask yourself. And the thing that you got to, at its core is this really worth it to you? You know, um, for me in the weight, for me in the weight, my members of my family are morbidly obese, and I was like, I could see myself going that route, and I did not want to end up that way. I was going to do anything that I can do to avoid that, and so it was of just critical importance to me. And so if it's of critical importance to you, I think you'll see it through. If it's not, and it's fine to be not. It's fine to experiment with things and figure out, hey, I'm not a swimmer, I'm not a runner, I'm not a whatever it is. Um, yeah, but it's how important is this to you, and you'll either push through or you won't. But I think part of it's just repeating it. Again, making it part of your identity. Yeah, getting the if it's like exercise, I keep coming back to that. Getting the right equipment, giving yourself time, giving yourself the opportunity to fail, and just know that's going to be part of it. Failing is part of it. Um, but in terms of habits, one thing that I want to make a distinction on: don't feel like a failure if you still show up, right? If you're let's say journaling, all right, and you're journaling, and you're going to like fill 2 pages, and you're like, yeah, I filled a page. Well, you can view that as a failure, or you can say, hey, I filled a page. I still did the habit. The big thing with habits is you don't want to break the streak. Now, the streaks are going to be broken. Stuff happens in life. Literally, last week I had to go to the ER. It was not a good day. Um, Things happen. And so, yeah, you're going to miss a habit. Maybe you got vacation or you got to travel for work and you can't do the thing. Great. It's fine if it's one day. But if it's 2 days, 3 days, if it's more days, then your habit is to not do it. And so focus in on, is this habit worthy of doing, and give yourself permission to not fail, but not reach your goal. That's fine. Just think the end game is I want to be a writer, I want to be an athlete, I want to be lifelong learner, whatever it is, the best parent. What's that aspiration? Yeah.
think we've got time for about two more questions. So I think along those lines of failure, when is it okay to let go of something that is difficult versus doubling down and pushing through? In other words, when should you quit trying a new habit?
I guess I keep coming back to, how important is this to you? How important is it? If it's super, you'll just feel it, which I know that that's kind of a crazy thing, but you'll feel either really, really good while you're doing the habit, and you'll feel really, really bad when you don't. Otherwise, it's just kind of this malaise, perhaps, because I've tried a lot of stuff, and like one of the habits that I try and do um, is meditation, and there have been times when, and most of it's honestly, I'm like, it didn't really change things. Now, occasionally I'll have days where it's like, oh my gosh, I see why people do this, but those are few and far in between. And so that's a habit that eludes me. And part of that is I just never have had the connection consistency with it. And so for me, in terms of being an athlete, it comes down to figuring out, okay, what are the activities that I just really register with, and do those versus the ones that I'm not that into. And so you got to just experiment with, what are things that you really feel and have that emotional connection with. And when you don't have that emotional connection with, and there's nothing there, I would not feel bad about. That's why I don't personally feel bad about, not meditating every day.
I think this will have to be our last question, but this comes from Matt. Does the effectiveness of a good habit building or the tools to build those habits change with age or experience? Thinking about how to extend this lesson to my children.
That's in a word, yes, but I talked about the ripples of positivity. Um, your children will implement, they just see what you're doing, and they will copy that because that is the norm of that household. And so there's this cliche of that, you're the summation of the five people you hang out with the most. And that is definitely, your parents just have that influence on you. And so that was what really concerned me with the weight thing, was my parents are overweight, my sister's overweight, I was overweight, and then I was like, okay, I'm not going to let this happen. And so in my own life, when I started really drilling down on all this habit stuff, I never would have, I never pushed my kids to go swimming. And yet that just happened because dad's going to the pool. You want to go to the pool? Dad's going to the pool. We'll go to the pool. And so it's just something that they pick up on. And so if you want your kids to have good habits yourself. And so they will implement and will model you. And so if you're, all those things that we talked about, if you're eating right, if you're exercising, if you're passionate about your work, if you're spending time in your relationships. I just heard the other day, like the average parent spends 20 minutes of one-on-one time per child. And I was like, I have very mixed emotions about that. And so it's about how do you spend time on the right things? And if you spend time on the right things, your children will see that. And there's just ripples of positivity through no fault of your own. I'm not forcing any of this stuff on anybody. But if anything, especially my 16-year-old, he is even more healthy and a little Arnold Schwarzenegger than I will ever be, because he saw it, he implements it, he models you, whether you like it or not. And so you see that with good habits, you see that with bad habits. So if you want your kids to turn out great, model the good habits yourself. That's a great question to end on, I think.
I agree. Well, thank you, Rob, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Transformative Habits. When the event ends in just a moment, you'll see a quick survey. We'd be grateful if you could share your thoughts and continue to help us make our virtual programming even better. On behalf of the Tippy College of Business, thank you for joining us this afternoon. And as always, go Hawks.
Thanks, folks.